A New York Times Siena poll shows that in 5 of 6 swing states, Donald Trump is absolutely trouncing Joe Biden. Again, this is a New York Times Siena poll. In the state of Nevada, Donald Trump is up 11 points on Joe Biden, 52-41 in that hypothetical matchup. In the state of Georgia, Donald Trump is up 6 points, 49-43. In Arizona, Donald Trump is up 5 points, 49-44. In Michigan, Trump is up 5 points, 48-43. In Pennsylvania, Donald Trump is up 4 points over Joe Biden, 48-44. All 5 of those states were states won by Joe Biden in 2020. The only swing state polled by the New York Times in Siena that did not tip in favor of Donald Trump was Wisconsin, where Joe Biden has a 3-point lead, 47-44. Now, a couple of thoughts here. Since I normally number my stories 1, 2, 3, let's go with sort of a law school outline form. A, this is absolute red alert for Democrats. Absolute red alert. The only thing that can get in the way of Joe Biden being the nominee for president in his own party as an incumbent is the inability to beat Donald Trump. Joe Biden, I have believed from the beginning, was a placeholder. Nobody voted for Joe Biden. They only voted against Donald Trump. Joe Biden was not, he inspired nothing. He inspired no love, no hope and change in the days of Obama. No big turnout at rallies, nothing. The only thing anyone went for was a pro or anti-Trump vote. And as such, if he can't serve the purpose of beating Donald Trump, well, then he has no use to the Democrat Party. And as far-fetched as it seems, I have no hesitation that the powers that be in the DNC would exert every single potential pressure point and power over Joe Biden to step away. There's still time as we speak right now for another nominee to step in. Will not that be Gavin Newsom, who's running a shadow campaign? He's absolutely running a shadow campaign for president. Well, that's Gavin Newsom getting on the ballot. It would have to happen soon. It would have to happen like in the next month or two. But you could get Gavin Newsom. You could get Michelle Obama onto that ballot. Now, would they have the ground game? Would they have the infrastructure? They would have the support, I believe, of the Democratic National Committee. Because again, if Biden can't beat Trump, what's the point of Biden? David Axelrod, the former big campaign advisor to Barack Obama, floated it this weekend on the Sunday morning shows. He said the Democrats should consider replacing Joe Biden. That could happen with a nominee, a candidate getting on the ballots, and like Dean Phillips, who's on the ballot in New Hampshire, where Joe Biden is not on the ballot, running against Biden, or it could be going to the Democratic National Convention, wherein because of pressure exerted by the outside forces, Joe Biden turns over his delegates endorsing another candidate. They have to beat Trump. That is their look. That's the reason for being. We've seen almost every political issue near and dear to the hearts of the left become somewhat hypocritical over the last 5 to 10 years, turn on themselves. Anti-war caucus becomes pro-war in Ukraine. Free speech in the 90s has turned into the regime of censorship over the last 5 years. There's really, if you're asked to define what it means largely to be a Democrat, number one is anti-Donald Trump. And so if Joe Biden can't beat Trump, they will replace Biden. B, I don't think under any circumstances will, when I say the powers that be, I feel irresponsible in that it's too generic. But I think that encompasses the mainstream media industrial complex, legacy media. I think it encompasses social media. I think we've learned the role that social media and the intelligence agencies and the law enforcement agencies and the Department of Justice in the United States have worked together to censor speech, including speech on Donald Trump, if you question the election of 2020. The powers that be will not. Well, they will do everything in their power to not allow the next president to be Donald Trump. In 2020, we saw, open propaganda. We saw the Hunter Biden laptop story crushed. Reported from the New York Times. Crushed. Nobody would report on it. 51 intelligence officers, high level CIA heads called it Russian disinformation. Social media obliterated it from public consciousness. We saw massive mail-in balloting that was we were told it was because of COVID, the dangers of having to go to the ballot box, that everyone should receive a ballot and you can mail it in. We saw the changes in state laws to adapt to that new reality. But the truth is, that was political. That wasn't scientific. That wasn't for our health. That was for our election. If anyone questioned the election after the fact, they were suppressed. There is no way the powers that be will not marshal every muscle they can to stop Donald Trump. Now, I don't know about you. I feel so highly propagandized. I mean, we all did during COVID. We know that. But I feel so highly propagandized in everything. Everything. Look, I feel highly propagandized on the war in Israel. I do. From both sides. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but everything I consume, everything I read, everything I watch with a fairly healthy level of skepticism. I do. And I think to myself, I'm going to go, I've got to look into that. I've got to see what I can trust, what I believe. Again, I think we all were probably left with the scars of skepticism coming out of COVID. I felt skeptical before that when it comes to reporting on, racial injustice. I think very rarely were we given facts and truth. We were only given conclusions. That's the thing. That's what journalism's become. It's become the great bequeathment of conclusions. You're told the end, right? You're told. And look, sometimes I think to myself, I don't give you enough conclusion. I think a lot of people want to. You probably don't. You're listening to me. So, Pete Hegseth and Rachel Campos Duffy sometimes make fun of me and sometimes praise me for how caught up in analysis I get. But that's in part because everywhere else I turn, all I get is conclusions. I just get, hey, this is your takeaway. This is what you're supposed to think. And then when pressed on these things, on why, you're a racist. You're a science denier. You're an election denier. You're a vaccine denier. You're whatever. It's ad hominem. Should you not just reject, if you won't just swallow it whole? Enthusiastically accept the conclusion. And I have zero doubt that entire, world of propaganda and requirement of acceptance of conclusions will be heightened over the next 12 months and marshaled. You know what? Marshaled against any Republican. It will. That's probably the world we're living in that we don't fully recognize just yet. We think this is all about Donald Trump. And I think it is very heavily about Donald Trump, but we're going on year 8 of the opposition being defined by Donald Trump. Do you think if by whatever mechanism, whatever happens, Ron DeSantis ends up the nominee of the Republican Party, it won't be all in turn marshaled against Ron DeSantis? It will be. On that, I have no doubt. Because I think the public and the media and whatever, 48% of the population has been conditioned for 8 years to think this is the normal course of being, that we are that democracy is at risk, that we are in an existential moment. And then we use all those same mechanisms against DeSantis. Now that leads me to C. They may not use, again, I'm sorry for using they. I think they is, insufficient for you. It's not, you shouldn't think they is enough. But I just described it. The intelligence apparatus, the media, the American government agencies. There's a chance that it's not marshaled to the same level of passion against Nikki Haley, because I think she is on the consensus side, the consensus bipartisan side, which permanent Washington is in lockstep with on foreign policy and war. But it will in some part. But she, of all the candidates, she would be most insulated against the same kind of treatment as Donald Trump. And that takes me back to this New York Times Siena poll. I should point out, other candidates are also doing well against Joe Biden. I saw somebody say Nikki Haley's polling kind of represents generic Republican, and people have posted that generic Republican would win this election in a landslide. But right now, if these polls reflect reality, and I think we should also be skeptical of polling. I think we should. It's been wrong often. But if it's accurate, Donald Trump wins the election easily. He wins it 300 electoral votes easily. But DeSantis beats Biden. Haley beats Biden. Generic Republican trounces Biden. So this is certainly a poll that will please Donald Trump. But more than that, I think it does terrify the Democrat Party. And that my next takeaway is D. That's now. How is it going to get better for Joe Biden? In the next 12 months, you could expect, I think you should expect, I'm expecting a serious recession. All of my friends who are in finance and not Kool-Aid drinkers of, the stock market's always up and away, believe that we are headed for a deep and traumatic recession. I hope we're not. I hope they can, give us the proverbial soft landing. I've talked about it on this podcast. I mean, I own stocks like anybody else. I don't want to see them crushed. But inflation is continuing to be a problem. Interest rates are incredibly high. At some point, that's going to have a reckoning effect on, all these commercial real estate loans that are sitting out there hoping to make it to a lower interest rate environment. And that's going to threaten banks if those commercial real estate loans go belly up. If banks get in trouble, what? And we've got to do something about inflation. It's punishing everybody, the poorest among us. So you're going to have, and there's nothing that affects an election more than the economy. So in the next 12 months, Joe Biden could be looking at a serious economic recession. On top of that, he's got a potential war on two fronts. He's got this proxy war in Europe against Russia and a spiraling, metastasizing war that threatens to engulf the United States in the Middle East. On top of that, there's the presence of RFK Jr., who in other polls shows something like between 15 and 20%. Now, how much of that's coming from Democrats and how much of that's coming from would-be Donald Trump voters? I don't know. My suspicion is it's coming more from Democrats. I don't know for sure, but I think it more negatively impacts Joe Biden. Not to mention, there's talk of a third-party no-labels candidate. Most no-labels candidates, I think, in this environment, would be hurting hurting Joe Biden. So between, RFK Jr., third-party no-labels candidates, an economic recession, and war, what's going to happen that's going to be an improvement for Joe Biden's condition in these polls right now? Well, that takes me to, I guess, E, which would be a conviction of Donald Trump in a court. This New York Times Siena poll suggests that it would flip. It would be much worse for Donald Trump if he were convicted in one of these cases. And look, We can have that conversation, have that argument. That's the point of the cases, to take him out as a candidate. But, the casual voter out there, and not just the casual voter, I don't want to say that, because I have a lot of Republican friends who are very skeptical of Donald Trump and whether or not he can win a general election. And you see this, and they go, well, what about all his trials? What if he's in jail? And look, let's be real. Does that make Trump a martyr that garners more votes? Or does it scare away, would-be Republican voters? Anyway, the takeaway from this New York Times sample, the biggest takeaway for me is less about Donald Trump and more about, I don't see how the Democrat Party will be able to move forward with Joe Biden. Story number 2. Dr. Anthony Fauci is guilty of perjury. That is what Senator Rand Paul lays out in his new book, Deception. In this conversation with the senator, we talk about his case, the case he lays out against Fauci, the big science industry, American government agencies, in perpetuating lies on the American public on the origins of COVID-19, the efficacy of masks, the efficacy of the vaccine. Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain Podcast for full episodes right now.